Hello, everyone. A very good evening to everyone who's watching us live right now. I hope so many people will join as the time goes by. I welcome all of you to Pick a Book Sri Lanka's Why I Read segment. My name is Ashinsani Veerasinghe, and I'll be the host for this program. Now, talking about Pick a Book, it is an effort to nurture the habit of reading in each and every one of us by deepening the love for books and enhancing social interactions. When talking about their vision of inspiring change, they try to inspire change through different segments of talk shows, and this is a segment of Why I Read. Now, through this segment, they bring forth iconic personalities who are readers, there to express the impact reading has had in their respective careers and in their personal life, and to elaborate how reading has actually helped them improve their life as a whole. Now, talking about today's Why I Read segment and talking about iconic personalities, today we have an eminent leader in the world of creativity who's also an avid reader. He is none other than Krishantha Jayasinghe. You must have already seen in the flyer. And hello, Krishantha.
Hi.
A very good evening to you.
Thank you. And same to you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And I would love to introduce you to the audience we have today, as he is the managing director of Sarva Colombo, and he would like to rephrase it as the chief growth whisperer of Sarva Colombo. And he's a corporate mentor for Pick a Book Colombo. And when you ask him what his passion is, he would definitely say it's growth. Be it a business that wants to gain market dominance or a person who wants to grow in his career, he would love to help them progress and reach the pinnacle of success. So with that, we are ready to start today's conversation. So Krishantha, how have you been?
Oh, I've been quite well and quite excited to be here. And I must say, sincerely appreciate that I've also been considered an iconic person. So thank you very much for that.
You definitely are. That's why we have you here. And the pleasure and honor is all mine to do this interview today with you. With that, now, first of all, to dig into the conversation, I would like to ask you the question. Do you think reading is important? And if it's a yes, why would you say so?
Well, the one-word answer is most definitely yes. And the reason is because when you're a reader, you really open yourself up to a completely new sets of worlds, you know. It could be worlds of opportunity, worlds of fantasy, worlds of education, worlds of fitness. It's one of the most cost-effective ways to expand your horizons, you know, especially when it comes to knowledge. And that's why I think, you know, reading is really, really, really important.
Well, with that, I would like to take you to your first days of reading. Do you really remember the very first book that you read, and how old were you?
Yeah, you see, I can't really remember exactly how old I was, but it would have been about 7 or 8, because the main thing is that I remember my first few books were Noddy by Enid Blyton. You know, Noddy Goes to Toyland and things like that. I used to devour Enid Blyton. And then, of course, I moved to all her other books, you know, the famous 5, Secret 7, 5 Find Outers, the Adventure series. I'm sure if you are a Enid Blyton fan, all this must be familiar to you. And to this very day, I don't know why this particular book, it's called the Circus series. And it's this book called Galliano's Circus. I still have memories of reading this. And there's this character called Jimmy and his dog. And it is still very fondly embedded in my heart.
I can surely see that from your facial expressions, like how happy and, you know, you've gone back to the kid Krishantha back then, that's inner child of yours. With that now, over the years, now you have come into the world of business and you're a leader. You always say that growth is important, whether it be in business or in personal life. How has reading really helped you in this?
See, uh, you see, I've I, when I was young, I was an absolute scam, right? So right, I mean, I was the black sheep of the family, and when others were studying, I was doing all kinds of nefarious activities, right? And because of that, I never studied, right? So it was, I have only my O levels, and whatever I have learned, right, has been through reading, from managing meetings, managing relationships, how to plan your day, how to start, uh, uh, how to have a vision, how to visualize, things like that. Everything has been from reading. So yeah, that's what it is. I think that answers your question, right?
Yes, that is. Now, how have you, like, when you read books, what is the way you read the book and how do you take a message out of it in general? Like, how has it really helped you grow in your life?
Um, okay, how shall I put it? Now, say most of the time, I have another notebook, right? Most of my books I read on Kindle.
Mhm,
So I have these notebooks
mhm,
and I take down notes because
mhm,
I try to, that way it helps me to recall my message.
mhm,
And because of that, that really helps me. Especially now, let's say there's this excellent book called The Perfect Day Formula, right? In
mhm.
fact, I have done a Peekaboo presentation because of that. That helped me to plan my day. And I think
Okay.
there are so many other books, which I will tell you later about, which has really helped to expand my knowledge.
Okay, great. Now, along with that, to the ones who are watching us live right now, I would like to remind you that your questions are welcomed. Towards the end of the session, I shall pick and choose and take them so that we can have a Q&A session at the end. So whatever questions you have and whatever you want to know from Krishant regarding reading, please send us. We will take them towards the end of the show. With that, Krishant, let's talk about now. We spoke about your initial stage of reading and then when it comes to now how you have grasped things to grow. What really keeps you inspired to read, like to become a reader? You're an avid reader, being a leader. So, what really inspires you?
Actually, I think how I started reading, right,
Mhm.
was because of my dad. Okay,
Oh.
he was a avid reader, so I think it was also in the genes.
Mhm.
But in addition to that, I am a extreme introvert, right?
Really?
And yes, and a recluse. You will never see me out in the cocktail circuit or anything like that, right? And some even, call me a loner. So a book has always been my constant companion. And sometimes, the book is the perfect prop to hide behind. You don't want to get into uncomfortable conversations. You don't want to have uncomfortable exchanges. If you're reading,
Mhm.
sometimes that really helps, you know. And so you see, also, as I told you earlier,
Mhm.
education was like a big gap in my psyche. I always thought, I wish in retrospect, right? Those days I was like, okay, I was a rebel and it really helped me to get whatever. But now I feel, oh, damn, I wish I had studied more. And I really don't have the time and the inclination to go and sit in classes or anything like that. So books are the quickest and easiest way for me to expand my knowledge.
Okay. Two different perspectives and very interesting answer. However, I don't believe that you are an introvert. Like I've been following you for a while and I've seen like you're a person with a lot of humor and you puts out messages to the world and I really don't see you as an introvert. Um, now let's talk about now earlier also you mentioned let's talk about the books. Let's talk about your top favorite books. Let's say five or six. How many books do you
Okay,
love?
that's very interesting. So I have six favorite books.
Okay.
all time. If like someone says, look, guy, help me to read.
Mhm.
So one is how to win friends and influence people, Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
The other one is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, or Tolle, I'm not sure. I think it's Eckhart Tolle. Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus by John Gray. Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And Ask and It Is Given by Esther and Jerry Hicks. Those are the top six.
I think all of those books are related to life in general, where you can take a lot of messages from,
Maybe that's
through which I'm actually coming to the next question. Would you like to share the lessons you've learned from all of these six books?
yes. So, if you don't mind, I want to take a little time and really explain this
Sure.
because
The show is all yours today.
no, because I think this should be the main crux of this presentation. So when it came to how to win friends and influence people, it was all about relationships. How to get the most out of the people you work with. And there is one particular phrase which really changed my life around, which was uh, a drop of honey attracts more flies than a spoonful of vinegar. Now, I must tell you, I mean, I was young and I was hot-headed and I was aggressive. And, I used to rub people on the wrong side. And this changed me completely. In fact, I realized, if I start complimenting people, making them shine, everything would change to me. And by practicing this, I actually managed to uh, grow extremely fast in my career. Then, okay, I'm just going to keep on.
Yes.
A New Earth, right, which is another very, very interesting book, helped me to understand this thing that there is something called the ego. Now, all of us have this voice inside our head, right, which is saying, why you could have done this, you could have done that. And we think it's part of us. But by reading this book, I realized, oh, hell, no, it's not me. It's something else. And Eckhart Tolle actually gives you ways and means of how to get it under control, that constant chatter in your head. And by reading this book, it helped me to bring my ego under control. Not all the time, some of the time, because to get it under control, otherwise you have to be a monk, right? Then, then there's this famous book. I'm sure all of you all have read it. Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Now again, they are also. I really thought males and females were cut from the same cloth when it came to personality, attitudes, and behavior. But after reading this book, only I realized we were two completely different subjects. And nature has made us in such a way to ensure the survival of the species. That is what nature is interested about, right? And primarily the purposes of the male is to provide and protect, while the female would be to care and to nurture. Then, of course, there's a very important book called The Five Love Languages. Again, this is done by uh, gentleman by the name of Gary Chapman, who is a marriage counselor and a priest. So what happens is most of us, when we express care to someone else, we do that using the same things which make us feel cared for, right? And sometimes that is not correct. What makes me feel cared for is not necessarily identical to what you feel cared for. So Dr. Gary Chapman was a marriage counselor and he had handled so many divorces. And after that, he had realized this and he has broken this down into five main categories, which was one is words of affirmation, complimenting, saying you can do this. The other is quality time. The third is acts of service. Then physical touch and receiving gifts. So these are the five main love languages. And again, when you say the word love, it does not have to be with a romantic partner. It could be with a work colleague, it could be with your children, it could be with friends. But all of us have different ways of feeling cared for, and it helps you to understand. Then there is ask and it is given. I'm sure all of you would have heard of the law of attraction, right? And there's the famous book and movie called The Secret. I wonder whether you have by Rhonda Byrne, The Secret,
Not
right?
really. No.
Okay. So the law of attraction is sometimes, if we don't realize it even, we attract things to us depending on our thoughts. The most easiest thing, I'm sure, which you can all relate to, is you talk about a friend, right? And suddenly you connect with that person, you bump into him, or that person calls you. Now that is a very simple example of how the law of attraction works. So The Secret is a very popular book. It is the one which brought the law of attraction to the masses. But Ask and It Is Given, and that entire series is actually where it all started. It's very interesting. It's called The Teachings of Abraham. And Abraham is actually someone from the other side, not in the real world, but an entity of knowledge who actually channels themselves through Esther and Jerry Hicks. So that's, yeah. And finally, I wanted to talk to you about The Prophet. Now, The Prophet, again, is an extremely interesting book. It's done by a Lebanese and American author called Khalil Gibran. Of course, it's very old. It was done in 1923. But to this date, The Prophet is still being printed, you know. It has been translated to over 100 languages. It has, I think, it is the highest selling book in the world next to the Bible, and the highest selling book of poetry ever. The Beatles, John F. Kennedy, Indira Gandhi have been touched by the words of the Prophet and being, motivated and inspired by it. And every time, when you are in a management position, you get frustrated, you get angry, and sometimes you get sad. And every time I'm down in the dumps, I actually reach out for the Prophet. And I read something, and most of the time, there is some words to comfort and inspire me. Actually, what I would like to do is maybe, read a little chapter from the Prophet, just to give you what it is. So the Prophet is about this old man, wise man who comes down from a mountain, right? And the people in the village ask him to tell them and give them advice and wisdom on various things. So like there is on love, on children, like that. There's only 26 poems. So this particular one is about good and evil, right? So it says, one of the elders of the city said, "Speak to us of good and evil." And the Prophet answered, "Of good in you I can speak, but not of the evil. For what is evil but good tortured by its own hunger and thirst? Verily, when good is hungry, it seeks food even in dark caves. And when it thirsts, it drinks even of dead waters. You are good when you are one with yourself. Yet, when you are not one with yourself, you are not evil. For a divided, pardon me, for a divided house is not a den of thieves. It is only a divided house. And a ship without a rudder may wander aimlessly among perilous isles, yet sink not to the bottom. You are good when you strive to give of yourself, yet you are not evil when you seek gain for yourself. For when you strive for gain, you are but a root that clings to the earth and sucks at her breast. Surely the fruit cannot say to the root, "Be like me, ripe and full, and ever giving of your abundance." For to the fruit, giving is a need, as receiving is a need to the root. You are good when you are fully awake in your speech, yet you are not evil when you sleep while your tongue staggers without a purpose. And even stumbling speech may strengthen a weak tongue. You are good when you walk to your goal firmly and with bold steps, yet you are not evil when you go thither limping. Even those who limp go not backward. But you who are strong and swift, See that you do not limp before the lame, deeming it kindness. You are good in countless ways, and you are not evil when you are not good. You are only loitering and sluggard. Pity the stags cannot teach swiftness to the turtles. In your longing of your giant self lies your goodness, and that longing is in all of you. But in some of you, that longing is a torrent rushing with might to the sea, carrying the secrets of the hillsides and the songs of the forest. And in others, it is a flat stream that loses itself in angles and bends and lingers before it reaches the shore. But let not him who longs much to say to him who longs little, wherefore are you slow and halting? For the truly good ask not the naked, where is your garment, nor the houseless, what has befallen your house? Now, if you see, he uses extremely simple language, nothing
Yeah.
complicated, but somehow, manages to convey these beautiful thoughts in a really simple manner.
I think that's where the magic happens, using the simplest words to give out the best of the message and, make a twist in our minds.
You won't believe so much. So I always have a couple of copies of the book, The Prophet, with me. And I give it out to various people. Because what happened was I was going through a tough time in my life.
Okay.
When someone came and said, look, CJ, listen, maybe this might help you, right? And it actually did. It gave me courage when I needed courage.
Okay, I think that's a book that we all should read then.
Yeah.
So along with that, out of all the books you've mentioned, something I strongly believe is the law of attraction. The book Secret, I've actually listened to the audio summary version. I have actually got it as a gift, but I still haven't read it page to page. But
right.
The concept of law of attraction is just amazing, and it just works in a mind-blowing way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So along with that, now I saw a connection between all your favorite books, CJ. So out of all, is there any particular type of books that you always choose, or do you go for a variety of types? How do you really choose?
I read a hell of a lot, right? I mean, you won't believe the amount of books I read.
I can see read, the book bars behind
and
you.
Trust me, this is just about 1/10 of the books I have, right? There's an equally large amount. This is my actual office space at home. And majority
I'm sure you have so many shelves.
Yes, right. So, sorry, no, I forgot the question. What type of books?
The types of books when you go to read.
Yeah. See, again, this goes down to on one aspect, I read fiction. Okay. On the other side, I read a lot of self-improvement books. Again, this goes back to my seeking of knowledge, since I did not study, right? Okay. And the third is I read a little bit about mysticism. Okay. Basically that is mostly self-improvement, business, and if it's Arundhati Roy, for example, I will devour her books. So that's basically how I look at what I'm reading.
Would you love to explore other areas?
See, I have a limited amount of time, right?
Okay, yeah, definitely.
So sometimes I read the same book three or four times, right? Just to make sure that the knowledge is embedded in my brain. Because most of the time you don't, just because you read, you don't absorb 100%. And especially, I love Arundhati Roy, right? Okay. And I do not know, have you read her book, Ministry of Happiness?
No, I haven't.
Right. It's this huge, humongous book, extremely powerful. Now, I've read that 5 or 6 times because every time I find something more beautiful to appreciate than the previous time I read it. Different aspects, different words, and so on.
So since you mentioned about the time factor, that you're a busy person and you have very limited time, I think, but you still find time to read. Yes. But most of us in the corporate world, we keep complaining about the fact that we do not have time for a hobby like reading. Now, how do you really find time for reading, and how can you really advise people who complain saying that they do not have time?
See, primarily, I've sort of made my sort of ensured that my life revolves around reading to a certain degree, right? First thing which I do is I read most of my books on my Kindle app on my phone, not on a Kindle, on my phone. So that means, say, when I'm traveling, when I'm waiting for a client to start a meeting, I can actually get a few pages of reading done, right? Then also there have been times, when say I have to go for a very long award ceremony or something like that, where I'm really not needed to communicate. So then what I do is I really, get a couple of hours reading done as well. So now, say for example, if I take a hard copy of a book, right, and go and open it, it's considered absolutely rude, right? But no one really thinks that you are being like bad, or it's rude to open your phone and look at it. So that's another way I ensure I get my reading done. Also, I've disabled all my notifications, right? So my Facebook, my Twitter, everything, the notifications are disabled. Even WhatsApp, 95% of the groups are disabled, and only certain key family and work groups are active. So I'm not bombarded with all these notifications, which is a huge problem to generally, because your phone is always buzzing, right? If it's urgent, they've been asked to call me, not to sort of bombard me with messages. Even my emails are not on my phone. So that means I can read without a problem, right? Without being my attention getting diverted. And thirdly, what I do is that I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. So what happens is, say for example, when I'm driving, right now you can't read, but I always listen to an audiobook or a podcast. Even the podcasts are most to do with learning and uh, uh, like say Jordan B. Peterson or Tim Ferriss. They have amazing podcasts. So I keep listening to that. I don't listen to the radio. I know it sounds a bit of a nerdish thing, right? And also Kindle has this thing where it's you have a book which you can read or you can listen to or do both at the same time. So at one point you can have it being read out to you. When you want, you can read it. And that's what I use as well.
Okay.
And especially what I want to tell the listeners out there is, if you want to get audiobooks, YouTube has a huge amount of audiobooks. They are for free. And that's one thing where you could start, because if you have the YouTube app on your phone, you can actually download a book onto the YouTube app itself using a Wi-Fi connection. Thereby, you don't waste your data. So that's one way of getting your audiobooks.
I think those are so many tips to find time if you really want to read.
If you really want to read, you can.
Yes, I think I also learned something. Probably I should replace my music when I drive to an audiobook. With that, Krishanta, let's talk about your workplace now. You're a leader in business, and do you think it is important to encourage your employees and your colleagues to read? And if you think it is so, how do you really encourage and pave the path to others in your workplace to get into reading?
I completely believe that everyone should read, right? But in today's context, I must say not many people do read. Now, most of my colleagues I work with are younger than me. And to be very honest, I don't see them reading. In my household, my daughters read. Again, that's because they've seen me read, and it's in the genes, right?
Influence.
Influence, yeah. So now, I think also it's part of it is this digital age, right? Where we want everything condensed to 160 characters, like it is the duration of a tweet or a SMS message. And a lot of people skim things off the top, instead of really getting understanding something in depth.
Mhm.
And so in one sense, Pick a Book is doing an awesome thing, by
Definitely.
getting inculcating reading. What I do is actually, now for my senior management team,
Mhm.
I have there is this channel or app called Mentor Box. What
Okay.
Mentor Box does is they have authors of famous books,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Let's say now The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
right? That guy himself comes and does a summary of the book for approximately about 90 minutes.
Mhm.
So, which you can extract the juice of the book, so to speak. And
Mhm.
what we do is we sit together and watch it and have a discussion and see what we can learn from that.
Mhm.
But yes, I feel reading is very, very important. And I wish I could get my team to read more.
Okay. So have you used any way to get your team to read as
Um,
you're a leader and avid reader?
Other than what I told you, getting them and making sure that they listen to the Mentor Box episodes, no.
Mhm.
Also mainly because we are rushing every day, and thanks to COVID-19, uh, we have to sit together and
Mhm.
enjoy. That is also has been quite tough.
I think this is the very first time I'm hearing a leader encouraging the sort of employees and the colleagues in his workplace with an actual action plan in a practical way. Other than just saying go home, find time to read, you actually put something into action and get everybody to listen and get into the side of reading, which is very
Yeah.
inspiring. Now, moving forward, now we spoke about the younger generation not being much of readers, right? In this context, they are used to the world of digital and they would love to just skim through things. Why don't we share a few tips? I'm sure you definitely shared these different kinds of apps and different kinds of ways that you can actually find time and read. Would you like to summarize everything and give the younger generation some tips of to make reading easy for their life?
Yeah. First thing is, what I think is, it's a mind shift. Reading is, if you're not moving forward, you're not still, you're going backwards. So reading is actually one way to always be in the forefront of knowledge. Even with your bosses, even with your clients, you will always be one step ahead. And that is going to give you lots of advantages in life. So the first thing I like to say is, do not look at reading as an expense, in money as well as time. Consider it an investment in self-development. Then number two is to get into a reading habit. Start with, now a lot of people think I must read good books, I must read impressive books. That's going to be tough. Read anything, you know, read
Even a
some
newspaper.
salacious novel. Yeah, or 50 Shades of Grey or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to get yourself into the habit of reading,
Yeah.
and then at one point suddenly you will realize that, oh wow, from reading novels you will read something more tangible, which is going to give you an advantage in life where you can learn, right? The third is, give yourself the permission to drop a book if you don't find it interesting. Just give it up. Read 3 or 4 books, it doesn't matter. Now a lot of us sometimes wade through books,
Yes.
right? And
I've gone through
then,
it.
right? So then what happens is reading becomes a bit of a real pain in the butt, right? If you
Yeah.
don't like it, if you don't find it interesting, just drop it. Otherwise, just skim through the pages. And by skimming through, you can actually sometimes get the knowledge. You don't have to read all of it. What they say is most of the books, to make it thick and increase the word count, they actually pad a lot, right? So by skimming through, you might get the best of it. Like now, say for example, I listen to this podcast called the Marketing Book Podcast. This particular podcast, every episode, it talks about a book. And sometimes what I've realized is, there have been once or twice where I bought the book because I listened to it. And actually, I gathered everything I wanted to from the podcast itself, and everything else was actually fluff, right?
Mhm.
And finally, what I say is, if you really want the learning of a book to be embedded in your life, try and use this thing. There's something called recall. What they say is that is the best memorization technique. You read a chapter, think about it. If there is anything interesting, put down a note,
Mhm.
or most importantly, see whether you can, teach someone else. Maybe now I know I read, it was called the Day Formula. I
Yeah.
read that book, but then I had to actually do a presentation for Pick a Book on the same
Okay.
book. And when I read it again, I realized there's so much more which I had not absorbed. And by teaching it to someone else was the best method to learn myself. So that's my advice to anyone who wants to start the reading
Mhm.
habit and actually improve their life.
Interesting. Now, I would also like to ask this question. Now, you mentioned that you're a person who would reread books a
Yeah.
couple of times, or three or four times, sometimes five, six, or what is your point of view about reading the same book so many times, and why would you do it?
Um, to me, uh, again, it goes down to the fact that when we read, we never absorb anything 100%,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So the best thing I can tell you is, imagine you go up country or you go down a beautiful path. The first time you enjoy the path, right?
Yeah.
But if you go down 2 or 3 times, you begin to notice several flowers, you
Yeah.
begin to notice several trees, you begin to really appreciate the individual little aspects of it.
Mhm.
And it is the same when reading a book. Sometimes reading it twice or thrice makes you notice things which you haven't noticed before. And sometimes it really helps to absorb the learning. That's
Mhm.
all.
I'm sure it also gives different perspectives through different characters of the book as well when it comes to novels. Um,
Yes.
yeah. And okay, I think we have a few questions I would like to take right now. We
Sure.
have Lakmali asking, when did you start reading? I think we answered that question. And when did you realize the importance of reading?
Actually, it's like this. I started reading when I was 7 or 8, and
Yeah.
most of the time I spent reading. Most of the time I spent reading, all the James Bond and Alistair MacLean and James
Mhm.
Hadley Chase and that kind of thing after graduating from Enid Blyton, right? But
Mhm.
then when I started to move up in my career, I realized, bloody hell, I need to expand my knowledge,
Mhm.
right? I need to learn how to handle myself. I need to learn how to plan my day. Then only realized, oh, I can do this by reading. I don't have to go to a class or go to a university or do something like that. The
Mhm.
knowledge I get by reading is more than sufficient.
Mhm.
I think that answers that question.
Yeah, that did suffice. And also, she is asking, has your reading material changed over the years? I think we slightly touched from a different perspective, but if you would like to take that question.
um Not really. Recently, yeah, I've also been, as of recently, I've been reading some spirituality stuff, right?
Oh, wow,
Uh,
mindfulness.
okay, mindfulness, more than mindfulness, what shall I say? Michael Pollan, The Power of Changing Your Mind, that's about uh, psychedelics,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Okay, How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, books like that. But by far and large, I try to keep within self-improvement, because I feel I need to constantly improve myself if I want to go further. And of course, novels by certain people who, like, there is Arundhati Roy, who I really love. Then there is another guy who wrote Shantaram. I don't know whether Gregory Abbott, I think. I'm not sure of the name.
Okay.
Shantaram, which is also an amazing book, right?
Hmm.
I go for authors who write beautifully. For me, words are art, right? So
Definitely.
I go for people who write in a poetic manner, like say, there is the Reluctant Fundamentalist. I don't know whether you read that book again, Pakistani writer. So like, yeah, they write beautifully and it's more like prose, which really, pushes my buttons.
Mm, great. Now with that, we have another question. What's the best way to get into the habit of reading? We answered that question. I've been trying without success for a while now. For someone as such, Krishanta, what would you like to say? Somebody who has tried getting into the habit of reading. I think we touched upon the techniques, but as an advice, what would you like to say?
Start first thing in the morning. Take 10 minutes in the morning before you wake up. And start reading 10 minutes in the night. That's what I say. And actually, I am sure this person he must be reading hard copy books. If you switch to the phone, you're reading, you have far more opportunities to read. You see, otherwise you have to take a book along with you when you're going to work. Then if you're at a meeting, it's different. So things like that. If you go to ebooks and read on your phone, I'm sure you will have far more opportunities. I know certain people think it's haram to read ebooks, but ultimately what you're looking for is knowledge, right? And how you get it, it really
Yeah,
does not matter,
that's
right?
that's true.
And another advantage of ebooks is you get it the moment it's released internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the little pluses. And now
Yes.
you can actually get PDFs and EPUBs. If you go to Google, there are enough and more. And even on Amazon, there are thousands of books which are free. Thousands.
Just like you mentioned, coming into ebooks, I think some of us, for example, myself, I'm not a person, even though we are in the world of digitalized world, I'm not a person who would read from the phone. Special articles into business or management, anything I would read on the computer or the phone. But when it comes to my mind saying, now you're reading, I want a physical book in my hand.
Yeah. No, I understand. And that's a bridge to cross.
Yeah. With that, we have another question. Any particular business book that has helped you in building up a company?
Let me think. Oh, goodness. Okay, one particular business book is called The Goal, which talks about production efficiency. I cannot remember right now who the author is, but if you type The Goal, that comes. And the other business book I always think is essential for anyone is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It is a business book. It's not
Yes.
anything else. Because if you get your relationships right, everything else falls into place.
That's right. I remember when I was getting into the side of training, that's the first book I was given to read, summarize, and do a training on it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so that is pretty interesting. Okay, then we have another question.
Sure.
Is there any book in which you thoroughly try to follow its learnings? I think he shared his top 6 favorite books and the learnings he took out of it. That answer.
One particular book, very specifically, which I did not mention here, is called The Perfect Day Formula by Craig Ballantyne. That I thoroughly try to follow its learnings because it says how you can plan your day. Now, in my case, I work with a lot of people, and so it helps me to that book
Routine
has really helped.
yourself.
Yeah, put myself into a routine and keep at that routine.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there any popular book that you don't like?
One book I could not stand
Okay.
and was 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh.
Right? I don't know why, right? Because you see, it's crazy, right? It's crazy because uh, there were certain people who loved it, okay? But for the life of me, I bought all the 3 books. I tried to read it. I bought the ebooks. I bought the hard copy, everything, right? Just to see what am I missing, okay?
Okay.
And I just couldn't. I just couldn't see what people saw in it. I
Did you
know there's
enjoy the
divide.
movie?
No, I didn't even watch the movie. It was
Oh, you
like,
didn't
you
even
know,
watch the
no.
movie.
My favorite. I mean, I know they say uh, books are, what do you say? Books are, sometimes the book is better than the movie. There have been 2 series where the book and the movie goes hand in hand. One is Silence of the Lambs,
Okay.
where Anthony Hopkins
Mhm, mhm.
is, uh, you know, um, Anthony Hopkins plays the part. So every time you read the book, also it's Anthony Hopkins, who's Hannibal, Silence of the Lamb, Red Dragon.
Okay.
That it's there is Anthony Hopkins is in your head, right? And what is that other famous movie about Bella and Eric and the famous books, the vampire stories? I can't remember it now, but I love that entire series.
Twilight, is
Twilight,
it? Yeah.
yes, Twilight. I do not know why people call me girly, people call me a wimp, right? But I loved that series. I really loved it. And the sad thing is, 50 Shades of Grey was inspired by Twilight. I really don't know how, right? But,
Okay.
and again, Twilight and the movie,
Okay.
right? It sort of goes hand in hand.
Okay. So this is an interesting area that I would like to ask a few more questions about. Book versus movies. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned your perspective about this, but when an individual, when he starts to read or watch a movie, what should he or she do first? Watch the movie first before reading the book, or read the book first and then watch the movie?
There is no hard and fast answer, right? The thing is, say for example, if it's the Silence of the Lambs, right? Silence of the Lambs, or even Forrest Gump. Okay, the Forrest Gump books are awesome,
Mhm.
right? There are 2 or 3 books in that
Okay.
Forrest Gump series.
Mhm.
Then it would be the movie. But
Right.
when it came to Twilight, I think after reading the book, watching the movie was awesome.
Mhm. I think so many people, I've asked this question at so many segments and I've got different answers because a lot of people say reading the book first is a must because then that lets you imagine the way you want and then you watch the movie. But if you watch the movie first, you're going to frame yourself around the movie and then read the book.
Yeah, but it all depends on the character, right?
True, true.
Have you read the Hannibal series, that is Silence of the Lambs?
No, I haven't. I
Right,
haven't.
okay. So now Anthony Hopkins is such a powerful character,
Uh-huh.
right? Everything, uh, so he is that person in your head. And that
Oh.
makes that book so much more enjoyable to read, even though it's all about cannibalism and murder.
I'm a person who's more into watching than reading, so probably
Okay,
this is
okay.
something I should try. Okay, we have another question. Any book that you would recommend to young entrepreneurs?
Okay. See, nothing comes to mind right now.
Mhm, mhm.
And I always see what I always say is how to win friends and influence people. Because especially these days, relationships play a lot. And especially when you're young, right? You're
Mhm.
hot-headed.
Yeah.
You think the world owes you a favor. You
Mhm,
think people should be depending or should be doing the way, have the same passion as you. There are so many things like that.
mhm,
So that is what I would recommend.
mhm.
And
And
even maybe that perfect day formula, because
oh,
there is also a perfect week formula,
mhm,
which I must say, a lot of people recommend the 5 a.m. Club. I have not read it, but that is something which I've heard.
Okay. And I think all the 5 books that you shared earlier, it helps you grow. There's no hard and fast rule when you say business entrepreneur. For example, law of attraction is something we all practice. We could
Yeah.
all practice, even in business.
See, we are always practicing it, but most of the time, the law of attraction, we are practicing the negative aspect of it. If you look at it, because we are always complaining, we are, oh, he's bad, and thereby we attract negativity.
Yeah,
the
true.
law of attraction works 2 ways.
True.
If you get it right,
Yes,
you get the positive and the negative. You attract whatever you focus on.
Yeah.
And most of the time, we focus on our negatives.
I think it's through these books and experiences that you become a person who you want to become. Not that you read a book into entrepreneurship and you won't be an entrepreneur. It's like putting everything into practice and working it out. Along with that, okay, we have an interesting question. You mentioned that you wish you could have learned more in traditional education. Why do you think so? And what kind of knowledge do you look for?
Oh, man.
I know, deep question.
Right. No, for example, I wish I had learned more economics, right?
Okay.
I wish I had learned more English literature. To me,
Well, you
language is
are all
beautiful.
that.
Yeah, but I would have loved to learn more.
Okay.
Mainly economics and English lit. Those are the 2 subjects I wish I could expand on, and also psychology, because behavioral economics is one of my most favorite subjects. And if I could have learned psychology, this is something I realized in the past 2 to 3 years, right? But yeah, I would have loved it.
Okay. I would also like to ask the question, if you would love to meet an author, who would that be?
Okay. Well, if I would love to meet an author, who would that be? It would be the guy who wrote Forrest Gump.
Okay. And then you get to ask a question from him. What would that question be?
For me, most of the questions would be what the inspiration is and how he writes. You see, I've been trying to teach myself to write, and I have lots of things I want to write about. Just like some people have got into the habit of trying to get into the habit of reading, I would like to get into the habit of being able to write and write well. I always say I'm a constipated writer, right? Because it takes a lot of time for me to put something down. Words don't flow to me easily. So I'm always looking at ways and means of how people write. And those are the questions I would be asking from him. His routine.
That's interesting. So just one more question. Don't you, when you read as an after activity, don't you write down what you learned?
I do. I write down. I try to teach others, help others with my little knowledge which I've gathered. But what I'm saying is, to write it in an entertaining manner, right? That is something I'm still trying to master the art of. It's an ongoing process.
That's amazing. Now, with that, we have actually come to the end of today's conversation, Prashanta. This was a great conversation. I also personally enjoyed it. And we had so many people engaging, and the questions are being bombarded, but I pick and choose what was necessary. So thank you so much, everyone, for sending us questions and making it an engagement conversation. Prashanta, thank you so much for joining with us today. Within your busy schedules, just like you mentioned, you have very limited time. This time could have been the time you had to read, but instead you decided to share it with all of us today. So thank you so much for joining with us. Do you have anything to say?
Thank you very much, and whoever who has who took the time to listen and to listen to me pontificate, so to speak. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. It's a great honor and a great pleasure to be part of Pick a Book. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Krishanta. Just like I mentioned before, the pleasure and honor was all mine today to have this conversation with you on behalf of Pick a Book Sri Lanka. So to everyone who joined us, thank you so much once again. This was the Why I Read segment with Krishanta Jayasinghe, who is the Managing Director of Sarva Colombo. Thank you so much for joining. We would meet you again through another episode of Pick a Book Sri Lanka. See you soon. Have a good evening.
See you, everyone.